Hello to all. Today, I'll be talking about our simulation of COVID spread for Paris, France for 100 days based on the paper entitled Estimating and Simulating an SRID Model for Many Countries, States and Cities, written by Jesus Fernandez Villaverde and Charles Jones, with the behavioral response suggested by John Cochran on his blog post, An SRI Model of Behaviors. So the model that we use attempts to predict the spread and recovery figure related to the COVID-19 virus in Paris, France, for a period of about 100 days, using an iterative process based on the state variables accumulated as of 20th September 2020. Basically, we're estimating how hard Paris, France will be hit by COVID-19 in the future. The main equations are beta of t, which is the contact rate of the virus relative to the location. This includes a constant value a that tracks and specifies our simulation based on the R naught today from the data set. This constant value is important for focusing our simulation on Paris, France. DT bar is an expected number of recovering people dying every day. It is made up of the rate per day at which a resolving person dies multiplied by the number of resolving cases. The effective reproductive rate is the average number of secondary cases per infectious case. Once we've started our simulation process, when R of E is less than 1, we've reached herd immunity. So the main state variables that were given were S, I, R, D, and C. The S stands for the susceptible amount of people that can be potentially infected over the course of a simulation. The I variable is the amount of new and existing infectious people over the course of the 100-day period. The third variable, R, is the number of resolving cases. The D variable, D, represents the number of people that die from being infected. The last variable, C, is the amount of people that have recovered and are immune. R of O is the basic reproductive rate. When R of O is greater than 1, the disease tends to spread greater than can be resolved. When R of O is less than 1, it does the opposite. As our initial R of O value was very close to 1, we predicted that our infectious values would possibly start lowering very quickly, as the R of E values were already included in that 0 to 1 interval, meaning that we had reached herd immunity. Gamma is the rate at which the infectious period of the virus resolves, so 1 over gamma would be the average number of days a person is infectious for. Theta is the rate at which the virus resolves completely, so 1 over theta would be the average number of days it takes an infected individual to resolve the virus, in either death or recovery. As we can see on our chart, once I run this right here, simulation ran. Here's our little graph model going. There we go. The number of infected people with regards to time elapsed is decreasing pretty much the entire time of the course of our simulation. That can be explained by the fact that Paris had already reached the herd immunity threshold before starting our simulation. We believe it peaked outside of our simulation. Over the course of it, D bar T seems to be slightly peaking early during our simulation model, as we can see around 10 days from the start of simulation. It then starts downward sloping quite significantly, with a negative slope similar to the infectious function. We believe that this correlation is somewhat believable since COVID cases are not spiking, causing a number of people to die, less people dying every day, as a few people getting infected, total less amount of deaths. During the course of our simulation, our effective infection rate, R of ET, values seem to be staying somewhat constant over the interval from 0.8 to 1. This illustrates how the city of Paris, France had already reached the herd immunity threshold before our simulation model had even started operating. And our RT and RO values follow the same pattern, which makes sense since our RT formula was based on the RO value. Since our effective rate stays below 1, there's been a decline in the cases that herd immunity has seemingly been reached. So overall, before we even look at the simulation we were going to be putting together, we had noticed that we were going to be observing a downward sloping pattern with regards to our infection rate. This is mainly because the herd immunity threshold for our location, which was France, seemed to have already been achieved. One possible reason for this is the number of cases before the date that our newest data had been released for, 20th December 2020, seemed to be show that they were going to be noticing a downward sloping trend after the very bad spike at the beginning of the month of September had showed overall in France. However, by doing some research and looking at what occurred in the aftermath of the 20th of September, our simulation model seems to have been quite inaccurate. There are a few reasons why this could have been possible, or to just made a discrepancy in a model. The main one is that people weren't being as self-aware during that period of time as they could have been. One possible reason for this is that no lockdown had been imposed by the French government, as it had been the case back in March, which is why French citizens might have felt as if they had more freedom to act as they wanted to, when in fact the virus was actually spiking at a significantly more important rate than in March. Consequently, the French government decided to go into lockdown again in the earlier parts of November, which enabled to lower quite significantly the infectious curve since. And one thing that we weren't 100% confident in when simulating our model was that the beta value that we were using, our beta value enabled us to predict what the number of contacts per day with other individuals would be over the course of a simulation. Even though our beta values somewhat change over the course of time in a model, it is extremely hard to account for the behavior that human beings will have over the course of 100 days, with no lockdown measures being imposed on them whatsoever. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.